been to countries where the recidivism rate is 3% or 5%. And it seems like in California, our prison system creates prisoners, releases people on probation, they fail to leave it 10 times, and each time they get probation, it's violent on probation. What would you do now in the Assembly, and how would that affect you as Attorney General to address the way that we handle incarceration?
Yeah. My sense about it, if you want to reduce the prison population, then you have to start in kindergarten, first of all. Very few educated people go to prison. And in my experience as a prosecutor, what you generally find is the people who are criminals can't read, never got the appropriate education, and certainly when they get to prison don't get anything remotely related to rehabilitation. It's called the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but there's no rehabilitation that's occurring. Part of that is because the discussion about prisons and crime has been defined by the right as punishment, 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 and never about rehabilitation, education, and preparation. The countries that have lower recidivism rates have such in part because there is a commitment to rehabilitation so that we can teach people a skill or a trade, deal with some of the learning difficulties that they have experienced, and their health. Oftentimes it's related to health. Those of you in education know if you've got children who don't get dental care, they don't learn as well, because they're in pain, and it affects their entire emotional well-being. So you got to deal with the physical, you have to provide some educational services, and then you have to transition them when they get out. On the parole, I've got a little bit of a different take on it, because I voted no on the part of the reform package that came through the legislature, because parole is controlled, and when used appropriately, it can be of benefit. And what the legislature tried to do in order to reduce the prison population is redefine the crimes for which they were going to hold people. That's kind of like if you were to say, you know, there's an awful lot of people who are driving drunk, so let's just increase, instead of 0.08, let's make it, you know, 0.10, and then we have fewer people that are legally drunk. It doesn't work that way. And in this last legislative package that they passed through, you may have read about how they wanted to eliminate parole for convicted felons who had committed non-serious, non-violent offenses. That was the magic language, non-serious, non-violent offenses. So when they finish their time, no parole for them. Well, here's the problem with that. I had my office get in touch with the California DA's Association. Here are some of the crimes that are considered non-serious, non-violent. Solicitation of murder, incitement to riot, elder abuse, child abuse resulting in serious bodily injury, hit and run resulting in death. There's a whole list of these crimes that are defined, they are in the penal code, they're defined as non-serious, non-violent. Now, there was no way that I was going to support legislation that would eliminate parole for someone, of course they've done their time, but who had committed those kinds of offenses. So I voted no on it. Most of the people that I know, they had no idea that was even good. But I think what happens is, as a former prosecutor, as an investigator, you're going to know to ask the question, what does that mean? And what's the impact of that? Now, I think parole revocation is probably used too often. The standards for revocation for parole could stand review, so that when parole revocation occurs, it occurs for a significant matter, not if someone misses an appointment, because then what you do is you're just sending them back for maybe 3 to 6 months. That's probably about 25% of part of the prison overpopulation is the return of people who have violated parole. So we need to reduce the caseloads for people on parole, but not by redefining crimes as non-serious, non-violent when they are.
how does that happen that, a legislator doesn't know what they're voting on? How does that process come to pass? Because, I mean, that is what they're supposed to be there for and why they have a staff and so forth.
Right.
And yet they're voting on stuff at the last minute or whatever.
Well, because part of what happens is that there's a reliance on leadership. And when the leadership tells you this is a good bill, this is what we need to do. Okay? And if you're a staff person and you're not experienced in this, you're going to read, oh, not serious, non-violent. You know, okay, so you wrote a bad check, right? I don't know how you would define that. But they wouldn't know to ask the question, what's that mean? Part of it is that, each and every one of us is allowed 40 pieces of legislation to introduce over a 2-year period. So I can do 20 1 year or 30 1 year and then 10 the next. So there's 40 and there's 80 of us. So we end up generating 3,000 bills. The Senate will generate, because there's only half of them, as many as in the Assembly, they'll do 1,200, 1,300, 1,500 bills. It's a lot of legislation to keep track of. And there's often what happens, there's a rush towards the end of session to get things done because we're looking at a deadline, and after the deadline, the bills will die, and we need to try to resolve a problem. And some people may actually, look, I don't know which one of my colleagues knew about what was specific language in that bill. Some did, some didn't. I just know that from my perspective, I thought it was important to understand, since it was a public safety issue, what was in it.
So it's up to the legislators to go to the source, somebody who knows what's in the...
Yeah, I think part of it, for me, it comes from being a lawyer and having that kind of training that I want to know. I want to be as certain as I can about what it is I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And it comes from being a prosecutor, because you have to build your case and you have to present it and you have to see, see the justice is done. It's a little different kind of training than other people who may not necessarily come from that kind of background.
Yeah, I mean, as a citizen watching that process is very, it's why the numbers plummet.
I know.
And,
No, I know. And a lot of, I think, the dissatisfaction with the legislature is in part because there are some signature issues that people focus on, and certainly the press focuses on, that report, and they like to report the conflict. They like to report when things don't get done, but there's a fair amount of things that occur that are of benefit to the people of the state that gets next to no publicity. Right? Most of the assembly members that are there, at least in my experience, they are sincere, they are hardworking, they're trying to represent their district. And I think the numbers, see, for example, when I first ran in 2004, I won by 5 points. It was a sweep, and I had a 12-point spread. So I only won by 5. That was 04. In 06, I got 65% of the vote. And then in 08, in Santa Barbara, I got 69%, and in the Ventura County portion, 67%. So while the overall numbers for the institution are low, can't argue with that. I think most people feel pretty good about their representative, assuming they represent you. Now, if it's Cameron Smythe, then you might not. Okay? It's kind of like that's a whole different story. But like in my district, that is Democratic, and I'm a Democratic Assembly member, the overwhelming majority of people are pretty satisfied with the work that I've done over my 3 terms. And I think in part because I try to find practical solutions for people's problems. Most people want a little bit of help, want something that's overwhelming and complicated, and they just can't cut through it. They need help getting it done, and then they want to leave them alone. They want to go to work. They want to raise their families. They want to make their own decisions about the kind of life they want to lead. And those things that they can't and they need help, that's what they want us to do. And I believe that's what you do, and then you get out of the way.